Imagine the White House, surrounded by forest. Imagine the Capitol, standing alone in an empty field of mud. No monuments. No marble. No grand skyline. In the 1700s. Washington, D.C. was not the most powerful city in the world. It was a fragile experiment built in the wilderness. A risky decision, a divided nation. And a capital that almost failed before it even began. What you're about to see is Washington, D.C. As almost no one has ever seen it before. Through a Reconstruction, we can now step inside its first streets and watch a superpower being built from nothing. Washington, D.C. in the 1700s was not yet the grand capital we recognize today. It was a bold idea carved out of swamps, forests, and farmland along the Potomac River. By the end of the 18th century, this landscape would become the political heart of a new nation. Its population was small, only a few thousand residents in the 1790s, but its importance was enormous. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways the original artists never could. We can stand where surveyors once stood. We can walk streets that barely existed. We can watch a capital rise from mud and ambition. First, I want to talk about the land. Before the city, this is the Potomac frontier. By the mid-1700s, this region was mostly rural Maryland and Virginia countryside. This view shows rolling hills in the background, dense woods in the midground, and the wide Potomac River in the foreground. Moving slowly toward the Chesapeake Bay, small tobacco farms dot the landscape. Wooden houses sit far apart. The air smells of damp soil and river mist. Enslaved laborers work fields under the summer sun. Boats drift quietly along the water. There is tension here. The frontier is still close. Indigenous nations had lived on this land for centuries before European settlement expanded. By the 1750s, during the French and Indian War, this wider region was shaped by imperial conflict between Britain and France. This land mattered because of its river. The Potomac was a highway into the interior of the continent. Trade flowed through. Its power would follow. In 1790, the Residence Act, signed by President George Washington, selected this very area for a new federal capital. What had been farmland would soon become a symbol. Today, the Potomac still flows through Washington, calm and wide, much as it did in the 19th century. This view shows the survey of the federal city. By 1791, surveyors marked the boundaries of what would become the District of Columbia. This view shows men with measuring chains stretched across open fields. In the background, thick forest still dominates the horizon. Pierre Charles L'Enfant, a French-born engineer who had served in the American Revolution, stood over maps and sketches. He imagined wide avenues, public squares, and grand sightlines. The sounds are practical: axes striking trees, horses shifting in the mud, surveyors calling out measurements. The smell of cut timber fills the air. There was friction almost immediately. L'Enfant clashed with commissioners appointed by President Washington. By 1792, he was dismissed from the project, yet his vision endured. A city built on diagonal avenues and monumental spaces was revolutionary for its time. Today, when you look at a map of Washington, D.C., you still see L'Enfant's bold geometry. This is the site of the White House. By 1792, construction began on what was first called the President's House. This view shows scaffolding rising around pale sandstone walls. In the foreground, workers hauled blocks quarried from Aquia Creek in Virginia. James Hoban, an Irish-born architect, designed the building. Enslaved laborers, European craftsmen, and local workers all contributed to its construction. The scene is noisy. Hammers strike stone, dust hangs in the air. The summer heat is heavy and relentless. There is risk here. Funds are limited. The young federal government is fragile. In 1794, the Whiskey Rebellion tested federal authority. Stability was not guaranteed, yet the President's House symbolized permanence. It told the world that the United States intended to endure. In 1800, President John Adams would become its first resident. Today, the White House stands on that same foundation, expanded and reinforced, but still rooted in the 1790s vision. This view shows the United States Capitol under construction. By 1793, the cornerstone of the Capitol was laid by President George Washington himself. This view shows the hilltop Jenkins Hill overlooking muddy roads and scattered buildings. The structure is incomplete. One wing rises in the midground, in the background. Open countryside stretches far beyond. Workers struggle with poor materials and limited funds. In 1798, construction slowed dramatically. The government was still small. Washington was not yet a thriving city. The tension is clear. This is supposed to be the seat of Congress, yet around it, there is almost nothing. It mattered because it housed the legislative branch. Here, debates would shape the future of the Republic. In 1800, Congress moved from Philadelphia to this unfinished building. Today, the Capitol dome dominates the skyline, but in the 1700s, it stood lonely and exposed against open sky. This is Pennsylvania Avenue by the late 1790s. Pennsylvania Avenue connected the Capitol to the President's house. This view shows a wide but unpaved road, mud pools in deep ruts, wagons creak through thick clay. In the foreground, pedestrians lift their coats to avoid splashes. In the midground, horses struggle for footing. The smells are strong: manure, wet earth, wood, smoke from nearby homes. This avenue was meant to be grand. L'Enfant envisioned it as a ceremonial link between branches of government, but reality was messy. Travel was slow. In heavy rain, the road became nearly impassable. Critics mocked the new Capitol as a swampy wilderness, yet this road symbolized unity between executive and legislative power. Today, Pennsylvania Avenue hosts parades and inaugurations. In the 1700s, it was ambition buried in mud. This view shows Georgetown in the 1700s. Before Washington existed, Georgetown was already a busy port. Founded in 1751, it thrived on tobacco exports. This view shows brick warehouses lining the waterfront. Ships anchor along the Potomac. Barrels are rolled across wooden docks. The air smells of river water and cured tobacco. Sailors shout in British accents. Merchants tally accounts. There is tension in trade. Prices fluctuate. Storms threaten shipments. The American Revolution disrupted commerce in the 1770s. Yet Georgetown mattered economically. It gave the new capital access to established trade networks. Today, Georgetown remains one of Washington's most historic neighborhoods, its cobbled streets echoing its 18th century origins. This is the Washington Navy Yard by 1799. As tensions rose with France during the Quasi War, the Washington Navy Yard was established. This view shows wooden ships under construction. In the foreground, carpenters shape planks. In the background, masts rise against the skyline. The sounds are rhythmic: saws cutting, hammers pounding iron nails. The smell of tar and fresh timber fills the air. The young republic feared foreign threats. A navy meant protection and projection of power. The yard became one of the nation's earliest shipbuilding centers. Today, the Navy Yard area has transformed into a modern district. But its origins trace directly to the closing years of the 1700s. This view shows life in the early federal city by 1800. Only about 5,000 people lived in Washington. Houses were scattered. Boarding houses were common. This view shows a modest street in the foreground. Women carry water buckets. Children chase each other in the dirt. In the midground, a tavern spills warm candlelight onto the road. There are smells of stew and smoke. There is laughter, but also hardship. Disease spreads easily in marshy conditions. Malaria was a real concern. Winters are cold and isolating. Class divisions are visible. Enslaved people labor in homes and construction sites. Politicians dine in candlelit rooms while workers return to simple quarters. This fragile city held the future of American democracy today. Few physical traces of those humble beginnings remain, but the foundations were laid here. This is the transfer of government in 1800. By November 1800, the federal government officially relocated from Philadelphia to Washington. This view shows carriages arriving. Lawmakers step carefully over muddy ground. The Capitol is still unfinished. There is skepticism in the air. Some doubt the wisdom of placing the Capitol in such an undeveloped location. But it mattered profoundly. This transfer anchored federal authority in a permanent home. From here, laws would be written, wars would be declared, rights would be debated. Today, Washington, D.C. is one of the most powerful political cities in the world. In 1800, it was little more than a determined experiment. This is Washington, D.C. at the close of the 1700s. By the turn of the century, the outlines of a capital were visible. Wide avenues cut through forest, government buildings stood proud but incomplete. This view shows the skyline at sunset. The Capitol wing glows faintly. The President's house stands pale against darkening trees. The city is quiet, small, hopeful. There is uncertainty. The United States is young. Political divisions are deep. The election of 1800 between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson will test the nation's stability, yet the Capitol survives. And that is what makes this place remarkable. When we look at these reconstructed scenes, the past does not feel distant. It feels close enough to walk through, close enough to hear the mud underfoot and the echo of hammers on stone. If there's another city, moment, or scene you'd like me to reconstruct and explore, let me know in the comments. Again, than